The offer that broke the world. The street was loud. Cars rushed by like they had somewhere important to be. People walked past with cold coffee and colder eyes. No one stopped. No one looked. Except for her. She was a small girl, maybe 7, sitting cross-legged on the corner of Sunset and La Brea. Her jeans were torn at the knees, and the oversized sweater she wore swallowed her tiny frame. Next to her, wrapped in a thin towel, was her baby brother. He didn't cry. Maybe he was too tired. Or maybe he had already learned that crying changed. Nothing. Keanu Reeves had just finished a long meeting downtown. He wasn't dressed like a star today. In fact, he looked like any other man walking out of a subway station, hood up, head down, just trying to get home. But something about that corner pulled at him. A quiet voice inside whispered, "Stop here." He turned the corner, and that's when he saw her. The girl looked up, eyes wide and hollow like she wasn't sure if he was real. Her lips trembled, not because she was cold, but because she was deciding whether to speak. "Mister," she whispered. Keanu stopped walking. "Mister, do you want him?" she asked. It hit him like a punch to the chest. He looked down at the bundle beside her and realized what she meant. She was offering her baby brother to a stranger. To him. He knelt down, heart pounding in his chest. "Why would you say that?" he asked softly. She didn't cry. She had probably cried too many times already. "Because he's hungry, and I got no money. People don't give money to kids like me." Keanu swallowed hard. "Where's your mom?" She shook her head. "She left. Said she'd be back. That was 2 days ago." And just like that, the world around him vanished. The honking cars, the buzzing phones, the busy city. It all went quiet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a granola bar he had saved from the morning. He handed it to her. She didn't move at first. Then, slowly, like she was afraid it would disappear, she took it. She didn't eat it herself. Instead, she unwrapped it and placed it near the baby's lips. Keanu stood up and looked around. There was no adult in sight, no social worker, no one who seemed to care. He sat down next to her on the cold concrete. "What's your name?" "Lila," she said. "And he's Theo." "Lila, how old are you?" 7. "Theo is 1. Keanu took a deep breath. He had seen pain before, on movie sets, in charity work, in stories from people he met. But nothing like this. Nothing that felt so close, so raw, so undeserved. "Lila, I'm going to help you, but you have to trust me. Can you do that?" She looked at him, really looked at him, then nodded once. "Good," he said. "I'm Keanu." "Like the actor?" she asked, eyes wide again. He smiled. "Something like that." Keanu picked up his phone and called someone he trusted, his longtime assistant, Marla. She answered quickly. "Marla, I need you to come to La Brea and Sunset, right now. Bring a warm blanket, and food, and maybe a stuffed animal." "What happened?" "Just come," he said. "I'll explain later." When he hung up, he turned back to Lila. She was still feeding Theo small pieces of the granola bar. Carefully, like a mother. They sat together in silence. Minutes passed. A few people stared. Some took pictures. But Keanu didn't care. He had no image to protect at that moment. Only 2 children who needed someone, anyone, to see them. Marla arrived 20 minutes later. She stepped out of the car with a bag in her hands and tears already in her eyes when she saw the scene. Keanu stood and took the bag from her. "This is Lila and Theo. We're going to help them." Marla knelt beside the girl. "Hi, sweetheart. It's so cold out here. Are you okay?" Lila nodded, but her shoulders shook. Keanu wrapped the blanket around her. "We're going to take you somewhere safe," he said gently. "Is that okay? Will Theo come too?" "Of course," he said. "You're not going anywhere without him." Theo whimpered softly. Keanu reached into the bag and pulled out a small plush bear. It was new, soft, and had a little red bow around its neck. Lila stared at it like it was a miracle. She handed it to Theo, who immediately hugged it close. Keanu helped them into the back seat of the car. Marla got behind the wheel. Before Keanu closed the door, he turned to Lila. "You don't have to give him away," he said. "Not anymore." She didn't speak, but her small hand reached out and grabbed his. Tightly, as the car drove away, Keanu stood for a moment longer, watching it disappear into the traffic. He felt something change inside him, something irreversible. He had thought he understood kindness. But now it was something deeper, something alive. What he didn't know was that this moment, the simple choice to stop and listen, would not only change Lila's life, it would change his too, and what waited for them on the other side of this night was more than just shelter, more than just warmth. It was the beginning of a story the world would never forget. The door he never expected to open. Keanu didn't sleep that night. He had gone home after dropping Lila and Theo off at a quiet, family-run shelter in Westwood, one he personally supported, but rarely visited. He trusted the people there, trusted them with money, with time. But never like this, never with something so fragile. As he lay on his couch staring at the ceiling, his mind replayed the same scene over and over, a little girl with a broken voice offering away her baby brother. Not for money, not for pity, just for a chance that he might survive. He had seen desperation in movies, read about it in scripts, but this was different. This was real. It didn't fade when the credits rolled. It followed him into the quiet of his home, the stillness of the early morning. By 6 a.m., Keanu was back in his car, driving to the shelter with a bag of breakfast sandwiches and 2 cartons of warm milk. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't want cameras. He just needed to know they were okay. When he arrived, the director of the shelter, a woman in her 60s named June, met him at the door. She smiled, but there was heaviness in her eyes. "They're asleep," she said softly, leading him down a narrow hallway. "Lila asked if you were coming back. She didn't want to eat until you did." Keanu stopped walking. Something tightened in his chest. They reached a small room, barely large enough for 2 beds. The lights were dim, but through the open door, Keanu could see Lila curled up beside Theo. He had the teddy bear tucked under his chin, and Lila was holding onto his tiny arm like it was the last thing she had. He stood in the doorway, not wanting to wake them. But Lila stirred, her eyes fluttering. "Open!" The moment she saw him, she sat up. "You came back," she said, her voice still rough from the cold. "I said I would," he replied, walking in and sitting on the edge of the bed. He handed her the milk and sandwich. "Breakfast." She took it slowly, eyes darting between him and Theo, as if unsure whether to trust the moment. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better than the street," she answered quietly. "It's warm here. And they gave us socks." Keanu nodded. "They're good people. They'll take care of you." Lila bit into the sandwich and chewed in silence. After a few bites, she looked at him and said, "Are you rich?" Keanu smiled faintly. "Some people think so." "Why'd you stop then? Why help me?" He paused, thinking. "Because I've been helped too. When I was alone. When I didn't know who to trust." "You were homeless?" she asked, shocked. "For a little while," he said honestly. "When I was young. Different story. But pain is pain. It doesn't care who you are." Lila didn't respond, but she reached out and touched his wrist. It was the smallest gesture, but it meant more than words. June returned a few minutes later. "I need to talk to you," she said gently. "In my office." Keanu followed her down the hall. Inside, June shut the door and sat behind her desk. She pulled out a worn file and opened it. "We ran her name through missing child databases," June said. "There's no official report, no record of her mother. And Lila said she never went to school. Keanu leaned forward. You think she's been homeless her whole life? Maybe not always on the street, June said, but definitely off the grid. He ran a hand down his face. So what happens now? Technically, she's a ward of the state, but with no family contact and no documentation, it'll take time. She could get lost in the system. Keanu's voice was steady but firm. I won't let that happen. June looked at him, eyebrows raised. What are you thinking? I want to help her. Not just for today. For the long run. Adoption? She asked, surprised. Maybe, if that's what it takes. June studied him for a long moment. You know that's not an easy road. They'll question your motives, even someone like you. Let them, he said. She needs someone. Back in the room, Leela was wide awake now, whispering to Theo and showing him the stuffed bear. Keanu walked in slowly and knelt beside the bed. How would you feel about staying here for a little while? He asked. With socks and food? She said. Yeah, he smiled. With socks and food and books and other kids. Okay, she nodded, but only if you visit. Keanu held out his hand, and she placed hers in his palm. I'll be here, he said. As long as you need me. What Keanu didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that deep in a forgotten corner of Los Angeles, someone was looking for Leela, not out of love, not with good intentions, but with secrets. Secrets tied to a past even Lila didn't remember, and those secrets were about to come back. The shadows that knew her name, the shelter was quiet that evening. Almost too quiet. While most of the children played in the common room, drawing or watching cartoons, Lila stayed close to the corner window, pressing her fingers to the glass. Outside, the city lights flickered, but her eyes weren't on them. She was watching for Keanu. He had promised to return after his interview downtown. She believed him. But deep inside, there was always a small voice whispering, what if he doesn't come back this time? What if everyone leaves just like Mom did? Theo was asleep in the crib beside her. The little stuffed bear, now missing one button eye, was nestled beside him. Lila touched his forehead gently, then looked out the window again. Keanu wasn't coming just yet, but someone else was. Down the block, a man leaned against a light pole. He was wearing a faded hoodie and dark jeans. His shoes were cracked and dirty, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. He had followed the car that picked up Lila from the street 2 days ago. He had watched the man she was with, and now he knew where they were hiding. He took out a worn phone and dialed. A number. Found her, he said. The girl. The baby, too. The voice on the other end was low and cold. Don't do anything yet. We'll come to you. She's worth more than you think. The man nodded. I just want my cut. He hung up and melted into the alley, becoming just another forgotten shadow in a city filled with them. Keanu arrived at the shelter just after sunset. He was tired. The kind of tired that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from carrying too many invisible weights. The moment he walked through the door, June greeted him with a thin smile. She's waiting, June said. Hasn't left the window. Keanu smiled gently. She's got a brave heart. He made his way to the back room where Lila was curled up by the window, arms wrapped around her knees. When she saw him, she didn't say anything. She just stood and walked quickly into his arms. You came back, she whispered. I told you I would, he said softly. They sat together by Theo's crib, and Keanu began reading from a book he'd brought, an old fairy tale with dragons and brave girls and forests that whispered secrets. Lila listened, head resting against his shoulder. After a while, she asked, Do you think monsters are real? He paused. Why do you ask? Because sometimes when it's quiet, I remember things Mom told me to forget. Like what? Lila didn't answer right away. Like a man with gold teeth who came to our tent. He gave Mom money, and then she cried. Keanu's stomach turned. Did he hurt you? He asked carefully. No, she said. He just looked at me, like I was something to buy. Keanu didn't respond, not because he didn't care, but because his throat was too tight to speak. This wasn't just about poverty. It wasn't just about hunger. This was something darker. "You're safe now," he finally said. "No one's going to take you or Theo. I promise." She believed him. But outside, the shadow in the alley smiled. He had heard enough. Through the cracked shelter window, he had heard everything. And soon, the people he worked for would come looking, not for kindness, not for justice, but for profit. The next morning, June entered Keanu's room with worry in her eyes. "You need to see this," she said. She handed him a small envelope. It had been left on the shelter's front step. No return address. Just one sentence scribbled on the outside. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." Inside was a photograph. It was Lila, standing on the street corner, holding Theo. Keanu's hands tightened around the photo. "Who delivered this?" "No, one saw," June said. "But we checked the cameras. A man with a scar under his eye. He stood just outside the frame." Keanu didn't hesitate. "We need to move them. Today." "To where?" June asked. "Somewhere they can't be followed." He called an old friend, a private security expert he had worked with during a charity mission abroad. Within hours, a team was at the shelter. They moved Lila and Theo quietly. No sirens, no noise. Just silence and urgency. They took them to a safe house in the hills, owned by a friend who owed Keanu a favor. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't large, but it had locks, cameras, and silence. Lila didn't understand why they were leaving, but she didn't ask questions. She just held on to Theo and followed Keanu, trusting him completely. That night, Keanu sat outside the cabin, watching the stars. Lila joined him, wrapped in a blanket. "Am I a secret now?" she asked. "No," he said gently. "You're just protected." "Why would someone want us?" she asked. "We don't have anything." Keanu looked at her for a long moment. "That's the thing, Lila. Sometimes people want what they don't deserve, and they think if no one's watching, they can just take it." "Will you watch?" she asked. "Always," he said. But deep down, he knew this was far from over. Because when people like that came knocking, they didn't stop at locked doors. They broke them down. The quiet before the storm. The safe house was hidden behind wild hills and twisted roads, surrounded by tall pine trees that whispered in the wind like old secrets. To Lila, it felt like another world, one where birds sang softly in the morning, and no one shouted at her to move. She didn't know what to call it, but it felt like the closest thing to peace she had ever known. Keanu tried to keep the days calm and full. They cooked simple meals together. Lila learned how to crack eggs without breaking the yolk. Sometimes she would laugh when Theo clapped for her, his tiny hands flapping like butterfly wings. There were books in the cabin, old ones with soft pages and folded corners, and Keanu read to them every night, letting the words fill the silence that used to belong to fear. But even in moments of quiet, Keanu's mind was never still. Every morning before sunrise, he walked the perimeter of the property. He checked the security cameras. He tested the locks on the doors and the latches on the windows. He knew the danger hadn't passed. It had just gone quiet. And quiet didn't mean safe. One evening, while Theo napped and Lila played with rocks, by the stream, Keanu sat at the kitchen table staring at an envelope in his hand. It had come that morning, hand-delivered again despite their hidden location. No one had seen the messenger. No tire tracks, no sounds, just the envelope. Inside was a note that said, "We still want her. Walk away, or we take all three of you." Underneath the note was another photo. This time it wasn't Lila. It was Keanu, standing. In the cabin doorway, the message was clear. They were watching. He picked up the phone and called Marla. "They found us," he said, his voice cold and steady. "How?" We didn't use any digital trail, she whispered. Someone close is feeding them information, he replied. Someone who knows our moves before we make them. Marla paused. What do you want me to do? Bring Jordan. Jordan was more than just security. He was a former intelligence officer who specialized in tracking predators, especially the kind that hunted children. Keanu had met him once in Haiti during a charity mission to rebuild an orphanage. Jordan didn't believe in speeches. He believed in results. I'll have him there in 4 hours, Marla said. Keanu hung up and stared out the window. Lila was holding a small yellow flower in her hand, twirling it gently like she was spinning the world. He stepped outside and walked toward her. You okay? He asked. She looked up. This is the best place I've ever been, even better than the grocery store parking lot. Keanu smiled softly. Yeah? Why's that? Because no one tries to take Theo here, she said without hesitation. And the trees don't lie. His chest tightened. You're safe now. I won't let anyone touch you. She nodded. I know. But the wind picked up, and with it came something Keanu hadn't felt in years. A presence. Jordan arrived just after nightfall. He didn't wear a suit or sunglasses. He wore old jeans, a worn leather jacket, and eyes that scanned everything. Twice before blinking, he walked into the cabin, looked around once and said, Someone planted a bug. Keanu's jaw clenched. Where? Jordan pointed to a smoke detector above the fireplace. There, standard audio surveillance, low frequency. Probably been on since before you arrived. Keanu ripped it down and crushed it beneath his boot. This is bigger than you think, Jordan said. This isn't some guy looking for ransom. This is a network. Trafficking? Worse, Jordan said. They're buying children for things that can't be said in daylight. And Lila, she's valuable to them. Keanu's hands curled into fists. We take them down. You sure? Jordan asked. Once you go down that road, there's no walking it back. I've already started, Keanu said. Jordan nodded. Then we'll need bait. Keanu flinched. No. Not her, Jordan said. You. For the next 2 days, Jordan set the trap. He fed false information into the lines, fake addresses, fake routes, fake plans. The goal was to draw them out, make them act. But predators didn't move without certainty. So Keanu made the hardest decision of his life. He took Theo and Lila to an old friend's ranch 3 towns over. A place with more fences, more dogs, and people who didn't ask questions but carried shotguns anyway. Lila cried when he told her he had to go away for a day. Are you leaving for real? She asked. Never for real, he said. Just long. Enough to protect you. What if they come back? He held her hands. If they do, they'll find me first. She didn't want to let go, but she nodded. Bring me another flower, a blue one. I promise, he whispered. He kissed Theo's forehead, then turned and walked away. Back at the cabin, Keanu waited in the dark. Jordan monitored the cameras and communications from a van hidden up the hill. Just after midnight, 2 black cars appeared at the base of the road. They didn't use headlights. They moved slow, like ghosts on wheels. Jordan whispered into the earpiece. They took the bait. Keanu didn't flinch. He stood by the fireplace, staring at the front door. He could hear footsteps crunching on gravel. 3, maybe 4 men. They reached the porch. Someone knocked. Keanu didn't answer. A voice called out, "Give us the girl, and we walk away." Keanu replied, calm but firm. "She's not here. That's not your choice." Then they kicked in the door. But what they didn't know was that the moment they crossed that threshold, they weren't the hunters anymore. They were walking into a trap set by a man who had nothing left to fear. The man who stood alone. The front door exploded inward with a violent crack, splinters flying like shrapnel into the air. Dust swirled, and in that moment of chaos, 4 men stormed into the cabin with quiet, rehearsed aggression. Their eyes were hidden behind dark visors. Their boots barely made a sound. They moved like wolves, fast, disciplined, merciless. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't prepare for, was the man who waited inside. Keanu Reeves stood in the middle of the room, his back to the wall, eyes calm, breathing even. The fire had been put out. No lights were on. The only illumination came from the moonlight leaking through the windows, painting his face in soft silver. He didn't hold a weapon. He didn't need to. The first man lunged, tall, muscular, confident. He reached for Keanu's neck, expecting hesitation. Instead, Keanu shifted slightly to the left, grabbed the man's wrist midair, and twisted it backward with quiet precision. The sound of bones snapping echoed through the room. The man fell, screaming, but Keanu was already turning toward the next. The second man pulled a taser. Keanu kicked the weapon from his hand in a single motion, then delivered a brutal elbow to his jaw. The third tried to tackle him from behind, but Keanu ducked, grabbed a chair leg, and used the broken edge to knock him cold with a blow to the temple. Within 15 seconds, 3 were down. The fourth hesitated. He backed toward the door, eyes wide, panting. Keanu walked toward him slowly. "You came for a child," he said. "You crossed a line you can't uncross." The man tried to run, but Jordan's team was already outside, waiting. The night swallowed him in silence. An hour later, the cabin was quiet again. The men were zip-tied on the floor, unconscious or whimpering. Jordan stood at the door, arms crossed, nodding slowly. "You still got it," he said. Keanu didn't smile. "I didn't want to." Jordan walked over and handed him a phone. One of them was recording, live streaming to a private server. "How bad is it?" "Bad," Jordan replied. "It's connected to a ring. International, high money, silent, auctions. These guys weren't just hunting. They were delivering." Keanu's hands clenched, his knuckles pale. "We're going to need to go deeper," Jordan said. "Trace the line. Hit them at the root." Keanu looked out the window at the empty forest. "They're not getting away with it. Then we start now." The next few days passed in a blur of coordination, secrecy, and fire. Keanu and Jordan turned the footage over to contacts at a trusted task force, one outside the usual chain of command. The kind of unit that worked in shadows, without press, conferences, or news flashes. In less than 48 hours, 5 arrests were made in Los Angeles, 6 more across the border. Warehouses were raided, bank accounts frozen, names surfaced, famous names, untouchable names. But for the first time, those names were afraid, and through it all, Keanu never lost focus, because there was one more man still out there, the one who had first delivered the photo, the man with the scar under his eye. They called him Vernon. No last name, no records, just rumors. He was a fixer for traffickers, a ghost who cleaned up messes, silenced witnesses, erased children, and he wanted Lila. Meanwhile, Lila was safe on the ranch, but safety didn't mean silence. One night, she sat on the porch under the stars, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Theo slept inside, snuggled in a warm crib with his bear. June had joined them at the ranch to help care for them while Keanu fought battles in the background. She brought warm milk and listened. "I used to think God forgot me," Lila whispered. June didn't speak. She waited. "But then I met him," Lila said. "The man with the eyes that didn't lie." "Keanu?" June asked. Lila nodded. "He didn't look at me like I was broken." June smiled, tears in her eyes. "He doesn't see broken things. He sees people." Lila looked up. "Does he miss us?" "More than you know," June said. But even as she spoke, her heart twisted. Because that night, for the first time in days, they lost contact with Keanu. Jordan's messages stopped. His phone rang and went unanswered, And the last signal from the cabin came with only 2 words attached. They found me. Keanu woke up in darkness. His head throbbed. His hands were bound. His feet were tied to a steel pole bolted into the ground. Blood dried at the edge of his lip. He wasn't in the cabin anymore. He was in a warehouse. Cold. Metallic. Silent. Then he heard footsteps. Vernon stepped into view. The scar on his face glinted under the low-hanging light. He looked down at Keanu with a crooked smile. "You made quite a mess," Vernon said. "But you forgot one thing." Keanu didn't speak. "You can protect a girl. You can protect a baby. But not from me. Not forever." Keanu's eyes, even, bruised and tired, burned with quiet defiance. "I don't need forever," he said. "I just need 1 more minute." Vernon leaned closer. "Why? So you can play the hero again?" Keanu smiled through the pain. "No," he whispered. "So, you can lose." Then, without warning, the ceiling exploded, ropes dropped, flashbangs burst, and a voice screamed through the static. "Hands in the air!" Jordan had found him, but what they didn't know was that Vernon had already made his next move. He had sent a signal to a second team, and that team was heading straight for the ranch. The fire that could not be silenced miles away from the chaos of the warehouse. The ranch was sleeping. The night was cool and still. The porch lights flickered gently. Theo snored softly in his crib, one hand gripping the stuffed bear that had survived everything with him. Lila lay curled on a small mattress beside him, dreaming of yellow flowers and stories about dragons who protected little girls. But the silence was not peace. It was the breath before the storm. 2 black vans crept up the back trail behind the ranch, engines off, tires masked by dirt. Men in dark clothing moved like shadows, disciplined and hungry. They had one objective: take the girl and vanish. This time they wouldn't make the mistake of being loud. They had no idea that someone was already waiting. June sat at the window. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Something in her bones told her tonight would test them all. When the soft crackle of the dry leaves reached her ears, she didn't move. She simply reached for the panic button Keanu had left behind, hidden beneath the windowsill. It wasn't connected to the police. It was connected to Jordan. The silent alarm triggered a signal across town where Jordan's backup team had just extracted Keanu from the warehouse minutes before. Inside the ranch, June moved quickly. She scooped Theo from the crib and woke Lila, pressing a finger to her lips. No words, just eyes. Lila nodded. She understood. They went out the back, through the kitchen, just as the glass in the living room shattered. The men were in, but they were too late. Keanu was bruised, stitched, and aching, but nothing in him was broken. The moment Jordan told him the ranch was under threat, he didn't hesitate. He took the wheel of the nearest vehicle and drove like the road belonged to him. Jordan tried to follow, but Keanu was gone before the tires hit the highway. Back at the ranch, chaos had bloomed. June hid with the children in a root cellar beneath the barn, just as the invaders discovered the empty rooms. Flashlights swept across furniture and toys. One of them found Theo's crib and laughed darkly. "Too easy," he said. But the lights died suddenly, one by one, and the laughter stopped. Then, a single pair of footsteps entered the house, slow, measured, deliberate. The men turned toward the front door, and there he was, Keanu Reeves, standing. In the frame like a shadow forged from firelight. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The first man lunged. He was met with a wooden chair broken over his back. The second reached for a weapon. Too late. Keanu slammed the door into his face, knocking him out cold. The third tried to run, but Keanu tackled him outside, fists flying with the fury of a man who had seen too much and let too little go. By the time Jordan and his team arrived, it was over. The men were tied up, groaning, bruised, some begging. Keanu stood over them, chest heaving, eyes distant. Jordan whistled low. "You good?" Keanu nodded once. "Where are they?" June stepped out from behind the barn. Lila was holding Theo, her eyes wide. She saw Keanu and ran. He knelt as she threw her arms around him. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. He hugged her tightly, words failing him. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something crushed and blue. "I found this," she said. "It's not perfect, but it's a flower." Keanu took it gently. "It's perfect." The story should have ended there, with safety, with rescue, with hugs in the moonlight. But Keanu knew something else. Rescue is not the end. Rescue is the beginning. 2 weeks later, Keanu stood before a judge. His lawyer spoke clearly. "Your Honor, my client is petitioning for full guardianship of Lila and Theo. He has met all requirements, and both children have requested him as their permanent guardian." The judge looked over the papers, then down at Lila, who sat beside Keanu in a small white dress, her knees shaking under the table. "Lila," the judge said kindly, "is this what you want?" She stood slowly and nodded. "He's my safe place," she said. The court fell silent. The gavel came down. Granted, Keanu closed his eyes. His chest rose with a quiet breath of gratitude. Months passed. The story leaked to the public, not the darker parts, but the truth that mattered. People around the world heard about a homeless girl who tried to give away her baby brother, and the man who didn't let her. And something happened. People gave more. People saw more. People cared more. Keanu never spoke about it on talk shows. He didn't post on social media. He just lived. He enrolled Lila in school, where she became known for her bright eyes and fierce kindness. Theo learned to walk in a garden filled with flowers. Keanu planted himself. Some yellow, some white, and one by the window, blue and wild and untamed. People often said Keanu had changed the children's lives, but what most never knew was this. They had changed his more, not just by needing him, but by loving him.